Yeah, we've got, got some of those. Inquiry, the college. So we, that's, so we think about having this kind of levels. Yes. Good idea. And then just. Yeah, we got some, gotta get some music. What do you got?
Hello, Shannon. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you.
He's such a nice man.
Welcome, everyone.
Turn it off mute.
There we are. Okay. Everybody hear me now? Well, welcome to our first commission meeting in 2024. It's been kind of an exciting last 30 days with all the weather related and so forth. And it was kind of challenging getting here today from out west. Actually, yesterday is when we came up. At any rate, we've got quite an agenda, and it looks like there's some pretty exciting information to be had. There will be an opportunity for the members of the public to speak at the end of the meeting. We had asked that you come to the podium, state your name, and spell your first and last name. And with that, Shannon?
For the record, the State Highway Commission is assembled in the NDOT Headquarters Highway Commission Room Auditorium at 1500 Nebraska Parkway in Lincoln, Nebraska. The date is Friday, January 19th, 2024, and the time is 8:30 a.m. A copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is in the room. Koppel,
Present.
Fagerlin, McGinnis,
Present.
Mello,
Here.
Hawks, Kindig,
Here.
Leaf Green,
Here.
Wolford.
Okay, thank you. Next order of business is to review and approve the December 8th, 2023 meeting minutes. Shannon, please call the question.
Tyler,
Second.
all right, Koppel,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Mello,
Yes.
Kindig,
Yes.
Leaf Green, Wolford.
Okay, thank you. Any introductions and announcements? I guess one announcement is today's first meeting with Shannon Ankeny as the Secretary of the Highway Commission, replacing Sarah. Sarah is still with NDOT. She took on another position as a state transit manager. And Shannon is a communication and public secretary, direct policy director, I'm sorry, and she's going to be the acting secretary for this meeting anyway. So are there any other I'm missing here? Okay, well, then our next order of business is remarks from our director, Vicki.
Thank you. I want to first recognize everybody from NDOT who's here today. Thank you for being here. We've got representation from the majority of our divisions within NDOT, and we also have representation from Wayne Fedora with FHWA. Thank you for being here, Wayne. I also very much want to thank all of our snow fighters who are on the roads again this morning, who have been on the roads since last Thursday. So it's hard to open up the conversation without recognizing the situation that the state has been in the last week. So we've got record-setting drifting and snowing across much of the state. It led to, on last Saturday, we had about 1,700 miles of highway under snow, which, just for context, that's right at about half of where we were for the flood, for highways that were under water or snow at that time. So to be able to get those open and cleared in a matter of days was of huge significance for our snow fighters. And so they've done an excellent job. The department really started planning on Thursday of last week after multiple conversations previous in the week about what kind of resources were going to be needed. So anytime we have a storm of this magnitude, we're planning weeks out to understand what resources we have. You know, the military in me is very familiar with your running estimates, your projections, what you're going to look for equipment. And so it's an opportunity to kind of dig back in. So we've been in the weeds and in the trenches over the last couple of days, making sure that we had the people and the equipment we needed to keep our roads open and safe. It's been challenging, and I would say a lot of learning opportunities have come out of a situation where the magnitude is just so great. Even if you're able to get roads open within a matter of days, you still have key freight. And in this case, our biggest issue was making sure people had medication, as well as making sure that our agricultural products could continue to move. So the state did have some losses in the dairy market. We were able to support most of our other producers in that area with some key requests and specific routes to make sure that they were able to keep freight moving. But all of this is very much handled at the operational level. So you've got our operations director, Tom Ringener, very much focused on that piece with Mo Jamshidi, our deputy director of operations, and then working with our DOMs and pushing that information out to our snowplowers. So it's a very sophisticated operation and one that I saw very few holes in. So as a director, it's just amazing when you see these very sophisticated and complex operations get handled like this. And everybody knows what they're doing. Obviously growing pains, but that's usually because things are never the same. And so I'm very proud of the work that's been done. At the same time, our staff in this office have been very, very busy in the last couple of weeks with something that I think we need to touch on today because of its impact. Many of you have heard us talk about the American burying beetle. So as we transitioned into legislative session, it became obvious that in order to help us as a department mitigate the potential impact that we saw as a result of the mitigation efforts we are going to have to do with Fish and Wildlife and Game and Parks for the American burying beetle on projects, we needed to take a hard look at NISCA, which is the Nebraska Non-Game law that really governs the threatened and endangered species elements at the state level. So you've got Fish and Wildlife and the ESA, the Endangered Species Act, on the federal level. On the state level, you have another piece of legislation. And so we've been in consultation with Game and Parks and understanding what their expectations are for the mitigation efforts of the American burying beetle. And after consultation with them, after consultation with the governor's office and the Transportation and Telecom Committee, we've actually put forth a bill to look at the roadway and specifically the public right-of-way. So if you go back to the conversations we had with Federal Highway beginning last year, as we worked through what our mitigation strategy would look like for this now threatened species, it was really looking at the roadway prism and the role of the public right-of-way in regards to critical habitat for that species. So this is an emerging issue. I would assume that there'll be quite a bit of controversy as well as conversation, hopefully, around this piece of legislation, but we are hopeful that LB 1135 will move forward with consideration as to the impacts that it'll have if it's not passed. And so we believe that we've been able to minimize any impacts to the species if the bill was passed. The basic reasoning here, in my opinion, taken from the governor's vocabulary, is it's common sense. We're asking for the public right-of-way to be exempted. The public right-of-way is essentially not deemed critical habitat in many places. And it's already been disturbed and been mitigated for in many circumstances. So we're asking for the public right-of-way to be exempt from T&E habitat. So for us, we very much understand environmental stewardship. We've done a lot to bring resources to our environmental section and understand the level of sophistication that needs to be in that area. This has nothing to do with this. This is actually a reason that why we have to invest in our environmental section. It's because we have to make sure that the actions we take are not going to negatively impact that species or fail to create a net benefit for that species. So after careful evaluation, we feel like this is the right way to go. In terms of context, if we do not get an exemption, we expect it to be between 10 and 20 million in mitigation for our 5-year program. So there's a big variance there because it's going to depend on how we can get the land. So we moved in parallel fashion to be able to buy land credits from a private company who is seeking conservation easement, because that is the only acceptable mitigation strategy at this time. And our first go around with Cherry County was not passed by their zoning commission. And so though we have this pending legislative bill, there's still multiple parallel efforts that are helping and moving forward so that we can hopefully not have disruption to our construction program, while still being very good stewards of our environment. So that is an area where we'll continue to keep the commission updated, but we'll probably be sending out communication before our next meeting, which is in March. So we also have a cleanup bill, just staying on trend with the legislative session, LB 966, which is just the NDOT's cleanup bill. We can get you more information on that, but it's really just dealing with stoplights and a few other pieces. Senator Brandt introduced LB 900, which has a maximum truck length. So some of you who have been on the commission for a while understand that we get very passionate about any time people want to talk about truck weight or truck length. And a lot of it has to do with making sure that we can protect the roadway. And axle weight is a big thing. With this bill, we were very much able to say, yes, Senator, we get the intent and we don't see a negative impact, so we can support the bill or at least be neutral on the bill. And so at this point, we're not increasing axle weight. We're not increasing anything outside of the length, and we believe it's an acceptable length for the design of our highways. So we've been able to support that. For some of your communities, LB 1163, which is Senator Lowe's bill for being able to plow snow with ATVs, might be of recent significance, and you could probably see the helpfulness of that as the counties and the locals have tried to dig themselves out from some of those town municipal areas. So that is another bill that we're evaluating, don't have much impact with. We've had a couple bills in the recent history where we've had the desire to cross our highways with ATVs or beyond the highways with ATVs. Safety is always the number one concern that we look at, as well as driver expectation, right? Especially at night, you need to have the vehicles lit, you need to have driver expectation. Speed goes into that. So this bill very much focused on the cities and townships. That's something that we can typically get behind or be neutral on. But when you start getting into the highway area, it's dangerous, and you never want to see that one accident at night for somebody failed to see it and they weren't able to slow down. So another bill that's a carryover from last year in intent, but a different bill, is LB 1218, which is the NEVI bill. So last year, this was LB 505. Most of you are familiar with the fact that we are one of 2 states now I believe, that have not passed the ability to charge electric vehicles kilowatt by hour. So we have unique, usually unique opportunity in this circumstance. It's a unique governance structure with public power in the state. So we continue to work with Senator Bostar and Public Power and the truck stops on getting a fix through in a language that everyone supports. We think we're there. And so this bill reflects it, which is LB 1218. We have a very small portion in that. Our piece is we really want to just see the kilowatt by hour go through so that we have the ability to take the $30 million that we have in NEVI and push it forward. We believe it's the right thing for Nebraska, and that is federally funded. And so for us to not take advantage of that federal funds to push out and build out our EV structure really only negatively impacts Nebraskans that choose to pilot electric vehicles. So another area that is a carryover from recent years is county bridge match. So we've had multiple conversations in the legislature about the future of county bridge match. I will say now what I said during session last year is that I do think in the future we need to take a really hard look at county bridge match and make sure that we're supporting the counties in the way in which they need to be supported, and really taking a hard look at the infrastructure that needs to be improved using these funds. That said, we can get behind and we can support LB 1030, which is Senator Bosselman's bill on the county bridge match program. All it does is it dedicates funding. It's $8 million, 2 different transfers of $4 million from the Roads Ops Cash Fund. I want to thank Senator Bosselman for this. We've had issues before with being able to have the legislative authority to spend money in this program. As you'll remember from 2016, the Transportation Innovation Act appropriated $50 million, but authorized $60 million. I see this a lot with the feds. And on the state level, that meant that we were going to spend about $30 million in county bridge and $20 million with the EOP program. And so even though we had the authority to spend 40, and so we're looking for ways around and understanding. We had found a fix within the department that was going to help us pay for the additional $10 million out of the TIB. But with this bill, we do just have a legislative intent. So we'll be neutral to supportive on this bill, and very much appreciate Senator Bosselman carrying forward the intent in assisting our counties. But I do think we need to take a hard look at the 45 and 55% to make sure that counties can afford the match, and understanding that a lot of those projects that were done in the first 7 rounds, or now 8 rounds, were much smaller in overall cost. And so now, instead of in the hundreds of thousands, low hundreds of thousands, we're very much doubling that. And so if you think about a county needing to pay 55% of that, they're saving up for a while. And so we're working with Ross Barron, who's their state bridge engineer, and Jody to make sure that we can fully understand what the counties need, and the working group will allow us to do that. So that pretty much wraps up the state side. Most of you are familiar and have sat through our funding discussions and understanding how complex they are. We as a state, DOTs are funded very differently. No 2 DOTs are funded the same. And so Nebraska is about 50-ish% federally funded. So we rely on federal funds for the majority of our asset preservation or highway program. So when we don't have an appropriation bill, we live in limbo. And to me, it's you now, instead of being able to take control of your assets and take control of your planning, you're very much reactionary. And it's a hard place to be in for being able to provide long range. This is what our program's going to look like. Because right now, I can't tell you what our program's going to look like in June and July. And that's unsettling for myself. It's unsettling for the majority of the people in the audience. With a CR environment, even though we're going through March, that means that our appropriation comes at last year's rate, so we don't get the increase that we originally had or had planned on, while we're still just month by monthing it. And when you have a fiscal state like Nebraska who deals a lot with advanced construction, meaning we try to get projects out as quickly as possible. We try to anticipate that we're going to get that appropriation from the federal government and program projects. And even though we're not a finance state, in many ways, advanced construction on the federal level is a finance tool for us to be able to make sure that there's no dip in us not getting a project out if the money's coming in, right? If we anticipate that money coming in. And so in this environment, really the main thing for the commission to know is that we are uncomfortable. Those moments of uncomfortableness come really in February lettings as well as in putting together the program. So we'll be making some hard decisions in the coming months on where we are, what kind of risk we can accept, and how much risk we can accept. So understanding with advanced construction, Amy, we've already accepted some risk. So just kind of closing out that thought, the CR that was passed last night does run through March 8th. So we have a little bit of opportunity as Congress continues to negotiate that. So we'll be working with FHWA and our federal partners to understand what that looks like. I can't go there without then going backwards a little bit. And ARPA, so in the legislature, ARPA is getting a lot of attention. We saw two bills introduced with senators yesterday, as well as a initiative out of the governor's office to reallocate $87 million in ARPA funds, federal ARPA funds, to the department. Unfortunately, the two bills that have come out of the legislature are not valid. There is very, very stiff rules around how you can use ARPA funds on surface transportation. Last fall, the Federal Highway and USDOT and Treasury put out guidance on how those funds could be moved to surface transportation. And the easiest way to sum it up is anything in your current program is not eligible. So the projects that we have that we're trying to fund aren't eligible for ARPA funds. So it makes sense if you're the federal administration, they want to use IIJA funds for those projects. They want to see them moved up that way, which means that for ARPA, what we're programming and planning to use that $87 million for from the governor's side, should we get it, is interstate reconstruction that was programmed from 2027 to 2029-ish area and beyond. And so it's work that needs to be done that we had prioritized maybe other things for, but we can pull this in and really get benefit from it and make sure that the pavement is improved. And so it's another difficult thing for us to work through with the feds, but it's definitely an opportunity to improve some of our interstate areas as well as some of our asset preservation efforts. So it does soften the blow of potentially needing to change our program for 2025, but at the same point, it's not an apples to apples. I can't just fill my coffers with ARPA money. And so we can obviously get more in detail if we need to in the future, but that summarizes kind of the policy areas of where we're at. I think I've touched on the majority of the things that we've had questions on from the commission. As always, we're here and we've got experts from every different area and happy to talk through any issues. With that concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Vicki. Next on the agenda is US 275 Norfolk to Wisner, and Steve McCullough, please.
One second here. Where's the on button? There we go. Are you doing it or am I doing that? Okay. Sorry. Good morning. Steve McCullough with the Design Division here in Lincoln. Today, short presentation on US 275. It's the next segment of 4-laning 275 from Norfolk to Wisner. This is an important step to continue on the design as seek concurrence on our project location, a very high altitude look at the design, and also approval on our access control policy on this corridor. I am going to get this right. This is working. Hello? Okay. So a little bit on scope or topics today. I want to talk about the project a little bit. Again, there are two different construction packages along this corridor. We'll get into that, and then just what we'll be seeking today from an action from the Highway Commission. So again, this is 275. Generally starting where the 4-lane ends coming out of Norfolk, it's around Highway 57 or just north of Stanton. From that point, we'll pick up the 4-lane and carry that 4-lane to just the outskirts of the city of Wisner. It's approximately 16 miles in length. This strategy, and I'll get a little bit more into the strategy later in the presentation, but it is what we're referring to as a 2+2. So we're utilizing the existing 2 lanes out there, putting them into a rehabilitation strategy, and then adding 2 new lanes to the corridor to create that 4-lane look. It's very similar to anybody who's driven or been part of the West Point to Scribner segment. On bridges, this one doesn't have much. It has 3 new bridges on it. There's no really major river crossings or rail crossings on it, so it's a pretty much an at-grade roadway section. So again, as I walk through this, I'll be asking what we'll be requesting today, and this one is the requesting approval on the corridor location. Yeah, why don't we just, if we could hit that. Next component here, I want to talk a little bit about, it seems fairly that we were just going to add 2 lanes and call it good, but this project did go through an environmental assessment. So we did look at several different options along this corridor. In very general sense, we looked at adding the two new lanes to the north with a traditional 54-foot median, adding 2 lanes to the south. Those are kind of the standard first cut looks. We looked at a combination of those 2, which would be, maybe 2 new lanes would be to the north through a portion of the project and then switch to the south. So the new lanes would be sometimes on the eastbound traffic, sometimes on the westbound traffic. Did take kind of a look at if you elevated the new lanes, you could tighten up your corridor, reduce some right-of-way impacts. Obviously, the cost goes up on that. But ultimately, where we landed was what just a stick figure showing here is it's kind of a combination of a wider median and the south alternative. So we're completely to the south, but in areas where we have either a grade difference or some environmental features, we push that median out beyond the traditional 54-foot. And I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide on that. I'm pushing, there we go. So on the 2+2, and I guess on this slide, I do want to talk a little bit about some recent activity we've had on this project. We did have a public hearing on December 21st. Even though it was right in that holiday season, it was very well attended. A lot of support for this project. I would say this is probably one of those ones where people have just been wanting it done. There was some, I wouldn't call it opposition, but there was some concern on, we have on this project 4 locations where we're using an R cut. They refer to different things. Some people call them J cuts, some people call them R cuts, RCIs. It's just a reduced conflict intersection where it's not a traditional 4-way, where we actually put you through an offset where you have to do kind of a 2-phase movement where you use the median for a U-turn. We have them in place, 81 in Humphrey. Also, there's now one on US 30, just north of North Bend. This one, there was expressed a lot of concern and hardships. So just this last Tuesday, we met with a group of locals, mostly farm agriculture, and took a deep dive and listened to their concerns. Right now, I can say that we are kind of back to the drawing board a little bit on these four locations. They're at County Road 568, 569, 570, and 571. We're gonna take a look at improving those, or not improving those, making some design modifications. One thing I want to stress when I get later into the conversation about access control, this will not affect our access control policy. So we're still good to go on that. We're just taking a little bit of a step back to address the concerns of the public. So on the 2+2 though, what the slide is, this is kind of that south alternative hybrid where we run a 54-foot median for quite a bit of the segment, but there are 3 segments where we go a little wider. One segment is that 92, and that's around the county roads 568, 569. That extra width, and even the next one at 78, that extra width is because the new lanes are a different elevation due to hydraulics. And having them so close, the crossover movement is a challenging thing, so we had to widen that out. We do have a segment that's 200 foot in width, and that is the area where we have actually a watershed that runs through our south ditch it was just been a big lift to mitigate. So we pushed the median out to kind of use in place that resource. So on that, we'll be requesting approval on the design concept. And the last ask today is the access control. This one I'm just going to read. Where we're at on the process is we've locked down our access control. Probably, I would say, a good shot at our right-of-way design, maybe like a pencil stage right now. And as part of that, right now, our access control is the regulation of public access locations abutting the highway facility. This concept provides safer environment, increases efficiency of movement, and reduces accidents by minimizing conflict points. So our criteria that we use is it's relocated and consolidated existing access, establishes appropriate spacing, full access at county road intersections, and between county road intersections, we only allow spacing no closer than 1,000 feet and no more than 3 breaks per mile. We encourage right in, right out to reduce frontage roads and field entrance locations. And we also weigh in the public's access between the county road system and our facilities. So on that, our last ask today is acceptance of us moving forward with our current access control concept. Last one is, I think, more for a your ask, but I'm going to read part of it. Again, just to recap, NDO hereby requests that the Nebraska State Highway Commission provide its advice to the governor of Nebraska in support of NDOT's proposal for the expansion of US 278 corridor from Norfolk to Wisner and for the use of controlled access as part of this project. I believe you have one letter today. I'm assuming it's in your packet that actually covers both the approval of the corridor location and design and approval of the access control concept. That was my ask today. I thought, since this one is a high priority project for the department, I thought it'd be just kind of cover where we're at, scope and schedule. This is something we presented to the public on the 21st. Again, this is a corridor that approximately cost about $104 million. That's okay. I didn't know that was me. where we're at, we just had the hearing here. In '24, we're going to spend our time finalizing design, purchasing right-of-way, with anticipated construction beginning in the spring of '25. Again, we'll start on the west segment, which is defined generally from Highway 57 to Highway 15, or about 10 miles of that 16. The next year, we'll let the second segment, or the east portion, and that's from 15 to Wisner. Both will be a 3-year project. So they'll be being run concurrently for 2 years, 26 and 27. At the end of 27, that first 10 miles should be complete. And at the end of 28, the remaining 5 will be complete. So on that, any questions?
Is there any questions here at all? Are we to vote on this or what?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll move to approve resolution number 2024-1.
I'll second.
okay.
Koppel,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Mello,
Yes.
Kindig,
Yes.
Leaf Green.
Yes.
Wolford. So in your packets is a copy, and then the one we will need to sign, Commissioner Kindig has that, so we can pass it along, or we can also sign it afterwards if you want.
Want to just do it now?
While you gentlemen are signing that, I just want to thank Steve for the presentation, but also everyone in the room who's had a part of this, the public meeting. We had a lot from the local area there, but we also had a lot of NDOT there. This is 275 is a major project for our BNA piece, and to have the next step in 275 and to see the segment moving forward means a lot to the department. So thank you for your support, and thank you to NDOT and everyone in the room who had a part of this.
The next item on the agenda is a presentation from Mick.
You're always so tall. Good morning. I'm Mick Sislo. I'm the State Roadway Design Engineer, and I'm here to give you an update on our utility program policy and how we've made some changes over the last 2 years. Before I jump into that, though, I do want to acknowledge some people that were really involved with this from the state side, just because this is above and beyond what we typically do every day. One of them is in the room with us is Nathan Sorbin. Jimmy Nicholson, she was our utility engineer at the time. She's moved on. She's still with the department. We have David Hansen, who's not in the room, and Kyle Keller. Those all within roadway design did a lot of effort to make this happen. I also want to make sure we check or include our legal team. Jeff and his team, they were instrumental in reviewing this and making sure that we were abiding by what we needed to do to make sure that this came through on the legal side. We had HDR hired as our consultant, and so Paul Knievel and Jesse Cooper, they came in and did a lot of the heavy lifting of the actual documentation for us, and then brought in a national perspective that was good for us to review as we move through this documentation. Okay, so as we move through this, the intent is we kind of have a 2-phase approach to this a little bit. So I kind of want to give a little background on where we're at. Obviously, we have a lot of concern when we were dealing with utilities during we have construction. And so that kind of brought this to fruition. During the construction of a project, we need the utilities either moved or being moved concurrently with the project. Anytime that's not occurring, we have a potential for conflict with our contractors. And that in itself will give us claim issues, and as we go from there, we're dealing with claims and impacts to then either slowing down the progress of the project and the utility impacts that may not occur when they need to happen as well, so, or improvements. So around 2020, we started investing in trying to get this moving forward to do better on what we call our coordination with utility companies. Around 2021, we had a few projects that kind of hit ahead that kind of drove this even further. We had a bill introduced by the AGC that was 339, I believe. That bill put some onus on the department, which was not something that we were in favor of. Obviously, we have some control over our right-of-way, but we don't really have control over the utilities. And so we began working with the AGC to hopefully find a better path forward. With that, then we step forward to improve some process. We'll talk about that process a little bit, and then we'll talk about the policy that covers all that in the end. So with this, we set some goals right up front. With these 4 goals, we really were trying to make sure that we are covering these and staying focused with our movement forward. We need to identify these conflicts with utilities early in the process. We need to make sure, as I said before, that these utilities are either relocated or accommodated as we move through the project as well. We have to continue to invest in our staff, the utility staff, and the AGC staff. We want to make sure that we're all on the same page and have a full understanding of where we're going. And then lastly, that big effort of actually updating the full policy so we can have it documented. So those are kind of our goals. And I talked about just a second ago, kind of towards the end of 2020, this started. By 2021, we were in full, I'm going to say, mode of evaluating and assessing our process. To do that, we worked with both the utility companies and the AGC. We did a survey to find out what we could do better. We did an internal workshop to say, how can we implement that and make those things happen? And then we turned around and went back to workshop with the AGC and with the utility companies. As part of that, then, starting in 2021, we started an annual process in which we go out each fall and we present to all the utility companies. So we go out to each district and we present our program for the next 2 years so that they know what projects are coming, they know potentially high-level impacts, and so that they know we're going to be coordinating with them. Those have been very successful. We've actually had very good input on that, and so those have continued to evolve into more and more information and exchange and building a good partner with our utility companies. At the same time, we also started what we call basically a committee or a utility committee or a task force with the AGC. We meet quarterly with them. With that really is developing a process with them so they understand where we're going. They know we're moving forward with our implementation of this process. And then also we've developed kind of a working group as kind of what we can do with them so they understand what they need to do better as well when it comes to needing stuff from us. And so it's kind of been a work in progress with them, and it continues to happen to this day. So as we move into that process, what are some of those things that we incorporated? So at the bottom here, you can kind of see our current process where we get our survey, we come out and we do our inspection form, which basically asks for where could these impacts be. We send the plans to the utility companies. We have this questionnaire back and forth to address those, and then we incorporate that into the status of the utility for our project. Well, those 5 steps occur today. They continue to occur in the future projects. However, we've come in and we've added quite a few more steps into that we worked through those workshops that we've had with the industry. And that's actually to get this information started sooner in the process. And so right after we have our inspection and survey, we can come out and start that questionnaire. So we kind of have a 2-step process where we say, hey, here's the information we know. Is this correct? Do you see impacts? And get that going up front. Then we target some of those locations. Some of those locations need a lot more time than others. If we have heavy conflicts, such as maybe a substation or something that's large in nature, obviously we need to get going on that well in advance or try to minimize those impacts as much as possible. And then we come in, as after we've done all that information, we're kind of at that process point of where we need to assess that even further. And so we have what we call a SU, which is basically your subsurface engineering. And so with that, we would go out there and make sure our as-built are correct. We may be even out there potholing, trenching out to find out where these utilities exactly are so that they don't have conflict in order to understand fully what that conflict may be. And then lastly, we come in and we create our utility sheets. These are sheets that actually go into the contract. And this is what now the contractors are seeing, where these mitigations are included with the project and what they need to know fully, what they need to know is involved with the project itself. And then we do our, this is the kind of step that we're working through right now is post-award communication. This step here is where the contractor is now part of the specifications required to have a communication plan with the utility companies. That is where then now the onus goes from, hey, we've done what we can do up front. We still stay involved. We're still part of the project, but now we want the contractor to get involved with the utility companies to make sure that they're helping drive that project forward. Okay, so then that was kind of our process. And so as we made that process happen, and it's been in process for about a year now, we started also at that same time overlapping that with our policy update, trying to bring our policy up to date with those new procedures included. With that, again, we kind of set ourselves up some goals to get through. Our policy hadn't been updated for 20+ years. So since 20+ years, there's been a lot of changes, whether it's from technology or from material improvements to expectations from the industry. So we want to basically include all those improvements that we just talked about with our process into this documentation. We want to standardize that as best we can so that everybody knows what their expectations are. And then at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we are addressing all the needs out there, including the regulations that we have to follow. So we started a lot. These are kind of a highlight, and we're going to touch on a few of these just to kind of get into a little more breadth of what needs to be covered in this documentation. But just from this list of 8, you can kind of see these are some pretty big overarching topics from the legal standpoint, all the way down to when we're addressing relocations to abandonment, broadband, all those kind of things are now included in this one document, which used to be separated into several documents. It was maybe a little more convoluted for people to follow, and now it's all contained into about a 170-page document. So with that document, then, again, the premise of it, what we started with was the legal side of it, to make sure that we are really introducing the overarching concept of this. It really goes further, and thanks to Jeff and his team to help us get that statutory authority defined and clear up front of what our role is, making sure that NDOT establishes what the permitting of the utilities needs to be in our right of way. Obviously, that's some precious space there, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then it also it gives the rights clearly defined of what DOT's rights are and the utilities' rights as we continue to move forward. So with that, too far, sorry. With that policy, then, as we created it, this was kind of the concept that we're talking about, that precious space in the right of way. Obviously, we have a roadway function out there. That space is public space, but it really is for highway usage. But being public space, we understand that there is a need for utilities to be there as well. And so as we have that limited space to utilize, we really come up with this theme and really kind of hit it home with the utilities so that they understand that what we're permitting today is going to be tomorrow's conflict. Not necessarily even for us, but for them as well. I mean, another utility comes in and hits another utility. So we have to be very conscious of where we put these utilities and consistent. And so really, that's really a strong focus that is throughout this whole entire document, to make sure that we are really defining where they can be and how they can be in that space. So with that, then, as part of that whole accommodation to that utility, we also had to include the legal side of it, where if they're out there working, they understand their performance bonds. We want them in and out. We want to understand that we want them to be safe out there. We want their roadway users to be safe when they're doing things. So they have to have insurance, and then the state also has to have indemnification from the process so that we're not held to something that they're out there doing. We also created that new section, broadband, upcoming technology that's continued to be pushed across. I can't say upcoming technology, it's an expansion of current technology, but we have to be able to address that within that space. We also have a lot of communication towers that are continuing to go up. A lot of those are coming up in small tower type communications versus in the past, there were large towers off the way. We need that technology for ourselves as well. So obviously we want to make sure that we are playing well in this realm of the world. And then we also have where, as you see, mergers, abandonment, those kind of things occur more and more often today. And so we have to have a way and a means to address that so that we know if this line is now abandoned and or belonging to somebody else, because sometimes that communication gets lost pretty quick. And that just leads to a harder conflict down the road. So with that, then also some more of the technical stuff, and we won't get into the actual specifics of it, but we also had to get in there and make sure that we were consistent with what we're doing from a horizontal requirement to vertical requirement, whether it's electrical overhead or gas lines underneath. We had each section in the past that kind of covered the specific gas line or electrical or communication. We've really condensed that into more of a table. So it's very easy to find, probably more understandable, I would say, from a layperson, that you wouldn't have to have a lot of heavy engineering to understand what kind of material you're dealing with. So those buried depths, when we're trying to get consistent with those as well, it's consistent also nationally. And then the casing requirements too are very consistent also with the technology that's out there today. On the other side of it there, we talked about those conditions. We really want to encourage and utilize as much shared conduits as we can. That's where if one dig philosophy kind of comes into play. If we're digging there, if we can maybe get more to go in there. There's language in there that talks about that and how we can maybe make that happen. The top one, sorry, I skipped it with the highway structure one. That's just really, if we have a bridge and they need to be on top of our bridge or attached to our bridge, they need to have some requirements that they need to understand the maintenance of that as well. And then lastly with this, they really defines their permitting process. As they go and do these construction projects on their own, They need to also follow all the permitting from whether it be NEPA or the railroads. That is on them, and that has been clearly defined now. As we're getting through this too, we also, as part of the process, as technology is changing and the pace of things are changing, we really had to have a clear understanding of what we're giving to them and what we're receiving from them, and that them being the utility company. As they're out there, they're doing a lot of quality control as well. So when they're out there boring or even trenching, they are placing their product or their fiber or their pipe in a location which they don't want to conflict with anything else. So they're doing a lot of work on their end. And so we've asked them and required them to share that with us, whether it be just as-built in some cases, but in other cases, we want the XYZ of where they've actually placed that. And then we, at the end of that, we kind of have a way of them submitting that to us in the format that we want. And so we have electronic requirements in which those need to come to us so that we can incorporate those electronically into our future projects without having to put a lot of work into finding out where all these are all over again. So once they're done with their work or doing their work, they give us their information as well. And then as we work through some of what we've worked with, actually the impacts, we've alluded to a lot of this, we talked about some of this, as we're actually building our projects, we need to make sure that we are standardized on a lot of what we're talking about here to minimize those impacts as much as possible. That formalized process that we talked about earlier on has now been incorporated. We've also done a significant effort into updating our agreements. Those agreements really take on twofold. We have a master agreement with the companies that really lay out what the expectations are. And then we have project agreements, which detail the levels of the project, what's reimbursable, what's not, and how we pay for those things. And then we also, within those master agreements, talk about non-responsiveness and those things so that we make sure that they understand what their roles need to be so we can continue to move forward. And then when we're actually getting into the construction of the project, we, again, just reiterating what we expect out of them and what they can expect out of us. This is where we're actually building with them, whether they're doing it out on their own and or with a contractor from our side of it. The notices that they get notified to go, the notices they provided us that they're complete, the traffic control they're out there doing, these are all clearly explained now within the documentation. Any changes to scope, cost are clearly explained to how they get that done. Expectations like cleaning up the site when they were done, and then also working through when we have non-compliant material or installations going in. And then there's that final component of inspection, and then when we need those as-built plans. We don't want those 5 years from now. We want them when they're completed at the end of the project. So that's kind of a high-level synopsis of what's included in there without getting into the details. Like I said, it's a large document, but it was an effort over the last 2 years to get this done. As of last week, we basically finalized that documentation. It's now out there on our website. And so what are our next steps? We have a few next steps to continue to implement this. Obviously, we're going to continue to educate and communicate with the industry and our AGC. We have a survey out there right now from the AGC side of it, since we've already implemented some of this process, that's asking the contractors and asking our project managers to say those projects that have this new process involved, how is it working? What's not working? Did you get good response when you were reaching out to the utilities at the construction level? So we hope to have those responses back soon. And that will help us then over this next year to see what we can do better. In the meantime, we're going to continue to develop more and more projects with all this process incorporated in it. That policy itself then too is, like I said, was released this last week. It's out on a website. This website is on our page here in Nebraska Department of Transportation. If you go to business, go down to utilities, you can go to that website and kind of open it up here hopefully. And we're just kind of scroll through it. And we're not going to really get into it heavy, but I just kind of want you to see what's out there. We try to create this as interactive as we can. The interaction part of it is something that we've heard through the responses of the industry, is it's hard to sometimes know who to contact or how to contact them. As we go out and do these workshops, we're making that face interaction. But as you can see here, we have a lot of language here that just gives them some hot links to where they need to be. If you keep going down, basically this feeds them right into how we're going to permit. And then you have, again, links of how we get to the site plan. This gives us the information on our future program. Again, even though we present it, we're posting it here so they understand what's out there and they can easily click to it and see where these projects are at. And then when it comes down to then, how do they get a hold of people? We have contact information again here that's real quick and easy for them to get a hold of us and interact back and forth with documentation. And then if you keep going down, Further, we have resources that are attached to it that include reimbursement, this manual that we just got kind of walking through high level, all of our agreements and policies that they can see that are associated with the utilities out there, the Buy America requirements, statutes, our design standards. These are just more reference material, but it's stuff that they've asked for and sometimes they just need to see. And then we have some hot links at the bottom here that finally kind of gives them a little bit more of a, if they have certain questions, what can they do? And then at the bottom is an actual contact documentation where they can submit their information to us and or ask for comments back. And so this is still in the work. There are things we're still continuing to update, but by having this interactive location where they all are starting to know and go to, it gives us the ability to update a template on the fly without having to go through a policy. And so they like that. They can use it quickly, and hopefully we can continue to make great progress on our utility coordination. With that, done. I'll answer any questions.
Any questions? A lot of information, Nick.
Sorry, I know, and I talk fast, but it's.
Maybe
getting
phone calls.
You know, a lot of that we take for granted and understand there's some planning to be done. And it sounds like we've got a lot of things put together here that makes good sense. So thank you.
Thanks, Mick. I know a lot of effort went into that over the last 2 years from a lot of people in this room, so thank you.
Okay. In our packets today, we have a new calendar for 24. And Shannon, you want to?
So in the December meeting, we had talked about updating the cadence and the timing that we hold the commission meetings around the state. So the calendar in your packet reflects that proposed new calendar that we were going to try out for 2024. It does reduce the amount of meetings down to 6 meetings, which does meet state statute. And then there are 2 meetings that would be in the evening on a Thursday, and those would be in March in Norfolk and October in Grand Island. So if you need a moment to look it over, and we can discuss if you need to.
Okay, I don't know. Has everybody kind of looked it over? Is there any discussion now, or? I like what I see, so.
Make a,
Yeah, go ahead.
make a motion that we approve the 2024 calendar for the State Highway Commission as presented.
Second.
All right, Koppel,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Mello,
Yes.
Hindig,
Yes.
Leaf Green, Wolford.
Yep.
Great.
Okay. And then the next agenda is the election for the 2023 commission chair and vice chair. And I guess Shannon, you're.
So in your packets, we have just the history of the different commissioners who have served as chair and vice chair, and traditionally have just kind of rotated amongst the different commissioners. As you can see, there's a pattern. So this year proposed to serve as chair is Hawks, and as vice chair are Fagerland. Neither of them are present. I don't know if they have to be to vote on this. Maybe they shouldn't vote for themselves.
They're not here to defend themselves.
I make a motion that that those 2 gentlemen be appointed as chair and vice chair, Mr. Hawks being the chair and Mr. Fagerland being the vice chair.
Second.
Yeah.
Okay, Koppel,
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Mello,
Yes.
Hindig,
Yes.
Leaf Green, Wolford.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. And then Mr. Koppel, you wanted this naming the highway procedure discussion. You want to talk about it a little bit, or what your thoughts were?
Well, we have had the last presentation, last meeting someone presented about it. I know we've had discussion in the past. I just wanted to put it on the agenda, so if there was discussion, if we wanted to review the policy, if we wanted to amend the policy, that we at least had it on the agenda. And I don't know what the commissioners' perspectives are, but I thought we at least ought to revisit it, given the fact that we had someone last month make a presentation.
Okay. Are there any thoughts? Anybody wants to contribute?
I thought the process worked like it was intended last month.
Yeah, it basically did. I've had the last, outside of the one on Highway 20, I've had the last three in my district, so it's, but they have all complied to what we have set. So.
There is a copy of the procedure in your packets that just kind of goes over, how we solicit the requests, the requirements of a request, and then the steps. So the step that we're at right now for the request from last month is that we are ready to send it to the governor's office for his approval. The official name that was approved last month is in the minutes as well. I have those in all these papers somewhere. Was the Fallen Firefighters Memorial Highway. Any questions about that?
No, don't think so.
Okay. I think we can move on to public input.
Okay. Okay, well, at this time is for the public input. Is there anybody that like to, do you have any letters or?
There are no letters.
And nobody on? Okay, so is there anybody here present that would like to make some comments? Well, I guess not. Are there any remarks from the chair? I'm getting
Jim?
anybody to talk.
Jim?
Yes.
Jim, this is Dave. I'd just like to commend the Department of Roads and the road crews. Northeast Nebraska was really hit hard this last week, and they did an exceptional job of getting 275, 81, 30, 57, 32, and all the other roads. And I just want to tell them thanks for all their hard work. We really appreciate it.
Yes, in my business, the communication factor that we get, the advance warnings on the roads and what can happen, and then the up to the date, I tell you that really means a lot, and it saves a lot of time and a lot of wear and tear on equipment, and ultimately saves a lot of lives. So the communication we get is just great. It wasn't so great yesterday coming because I was already en route when I got that. In fact, Shannon was calling me. And I'm going to tell you, between Aurora and York, you couldn't see anything. And I pulled over to the shoulder and finally drove on the shoulder for a while. I still can't say enough about the communication and what it does for the people, the truckers and so forth that are out there. So I want to thank everybody from NDOT that does that. Okay, Shannon, you want to tell us about our public meeting calendar?
So this is going to be a pretty busy couple months of public meetings. We will hold a number of public information meetings on the York to Columbus project in 3 different communities. March 12th at Shelby Rising City Public Schools from 5 to 7 p.m. March 13th at the Osceola Auditorium from 5 to 7 p.m. and March 14th at the Holtis Convention Center from 5 to 7 p.m. The next scheduled meeting for the Highway Commission is March 28th, 2024 at 6 p.m. in Norfolk at the City Council Chambers.
Okay, thank you. Well, I guess unless somebody's got something to say, I'm gonna close it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
You said the York?
Thanks, Shannon. Bye.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.